In this episode of EcoSense for Living, we focus on humans who protect our greatest natural resource, the ocean. We explore recovery efforts in Tampa Bay and the Gulf of Mexico, and an artist and an Oscar-winning filmmaker spread the word in creative ways. Decades ago, people in the Tampa Bay area knew there was something very wrong with their beloved bay. Volunteers, nonprofits, state and local government and industry pulled together to clean up the bay, and it's not over yet.
In the 70s, we had a lot of nutrient pollution coming into the bay, nitrogen and phosphorus, from our wastewater treatment plants and also from stormwater runoff. And as a result of that, there was a lot of algae that grew in the bay. Some of the algae would wash ashore and coat the beaches around some of the downtown Tampa Bay area and other areas around Tampa Bay. And citizens were really upset at that point because of the amount of algae that was on the shoreline. It was dying and coming ashore and really smelled. The citizens actually, in the late 1970s, called for action. The state required our wastewater treatment plants to reduce the amount of nitrogen, one of the key nutrients coming into the bay, by about 90% within just 3 years. One of the first things that the Tampa Bay Estuary Program did in the 1990s, early 1990s, was asked through a survey what the citizens wanted Tampa Bay to look like. They identified 3 things. They wanted clear water, they wanted to be able to swim without algae, and they wanted better fishing. Those 3 things really led our program to adopt seagrass as a long-term goal, because seagrass requires clear water. The more seagrass, the less algae, and seagrass also is very important as a fish habitat for Tampa Bay. We had lost about 20,000 acres between 1950 and 1990. So that was a very aggressive goal at that point. But over the years, over the last 25 years, with all the different actions that our partners have taken, the water in Tampa Bay now is as clear as it was in 1950, which is truly amazing given that we have 1 million more people living in our watershed than we did in 1990.
Less algae and the return of seagrass means that another important bay dweller is coming back, and community volunteers couldn't be more excited about it.
We got a fairly strong outgoing tide, especially in the morning. The scallops like to kind of actually literally sit up on the seagrass and kind of filter feed, but they may also be down on the bottom as well. So yeah, you can use this 1 meter PVC as you go, kind of push your way through the seagrass. So look for good seagrass to give us the optimal chance to see these scallops. However you want to place those transects is up to you.
The Great Bay Scallop Search is something that's been going on now for 22 years. We have volunteers that volunteer their boats, their time, and they basically go out from this boat ramp to the designated areas they've been given by us, take a transect line out there, and basically they're out there to search for scallops. They're gonna swim up and down that line, count as many scallops as they can find. We're gonna pile that, bring it all back, and calculate a total and try to figure out what the health of the scallop population here in Tampa Bay is. Bay scallops are very important because they're very susceptible to runoff, pollution, things like that. They're a keystone species, which means that basically, if they're in the bay, that means we're doing an amazing job. That means it's a very healthy ecosystem. So how many scallops you found?
About 12, 15.
Yeah? What do they look like? They got orange,
This one is orange inside.
They've got orange inside. They've got some growth on the outside of oysters.
Cool. If they're bright orange on the inside, it means they're ready to spawn.
They have a row of blue eyes on either shell. They're really beautiful animals.
They're crushing it over at Tarpon Key. All right. I mean, like 14 in a transect?
No, I work with animals anyway. I'm a veterinarian, so this is just another way to kind of, see what's going on locally with the wildlife. Hopefully, the more animals like scallops that we see means that the water is getting cleaner, more suitable to, this kind of sea life coming back into the area.
Today we found 232 bay scallops. That's up from 112 last year. That's up from 51 the year before, and even 9 the year before that. So we're seeing an increase every year for the last about half a decade. That's a great sign that the pollution, the runoff of fertilizers, all these bans on fertilizing your yard in the summer are having an impact and showing that the bay is improving leaps and bounds. I've been here when there was no seagrass on big sandy shoals that we used to plant seagrass on that are now completely covered in seagrass. I've seen the fishing improve greatly as an avid fisherman out here on the water. It's been amazing. As a soon-to-be father, I'm just encouraged by all this because someday my little girl is going to be able to go out on a kayak with me out here, see all the scallops, see the fish, see all the wading birds, everything we've done to really benefit what we have going on here. And, you know, I'll be able to tell her I had something to do with that, so it'll be great.
In recent years, southeastern Louisiana has taken a hit from Mother Nature.
We've dealt with a lot of storms since 2000. Katrina was of course, the largest and tore out a bunch of marsh. We had the BP oil spill. That oil permeated a lot of different areas. It was truly terrible. You know, we were just kind of getting past Katrina and all the storms, but we have lost marsh that has not come back because of that oil spill.
The marsh is eroding away because we no longer have sediment coming down the Mississippi. The Corps of Engineers had to protect the people that lived here, so we levied it off. And that sediment constantly replenished the marsh and rebuilt and allowed vegetation to regrow. When you shut those tributaries off by levying things off, we no longer have these sediments.
Here we're standing on a levee. Infrastructure we didn't need 50 years ago because the marsh was high enough. We had barrier islands. The storm surges had trouble reaching here. Because of the land laws, the barrier island shrinking. Now the Gulf has gotten 40 miles closer to us. We had to build this levee system, and we've had to increase the height of the levee system.
Everyone knows that the water is rising and the earth is sinking. So that doesn't help us here in Louisiana when we're already so close to sea level. Even today, there's no hurricane, there's not a tropical storm out. We just have a high tide day and high winds, and the water is over the roadways. If we don't fix it, we lose so many things. People come from all over the world to South Louisiana to fish, to come and eat, to come to our celebrations. And if we lose all of this, if we have no land to live on, then an entire way of life is gone.
This area below sea level has a lot to contend with on a day-to-day basis, and one family business has found a creative way to help return what was lost.
We decided to start Martin Ecosystems. The product was a floating island, and the inventor, Bruce Kanya, thought of this product as a way to help treat water. But when my dad saw it, he thought, well, how could that help us with our coastal erosion problem, in a sense, creating new marsh?
As a family, we have 5 children, and they were all in different parts of their lives, and there was an opportunity there to bring everybody together and say, hey, you don't want to do this. We want to buy the license for 6 states, and we did.
What we have is a sample of a floating island. And the basis of the floating island is this matrix material. Looks like a little Brillo pad. It's great for scrubbing pots. But what it's made of is recycled, reused PET plastic. We adhere the layers together with a marine foam. So these are foam pockets. And the foam has 2 purposes. Number 1 is to adhere the layers, and then also to provide buoyancy, enabling the islands to float. We pre-drill holes, which makes it very easy to plant whatever type of vegetation that we are using. The silts are very soft, and it's very hard to anchor things into. So we have to use trailer anchors that go deep into clay so that the islands will hold in place. This material has been tested, and it is non-toxic to fish. There's no leaching, so this plastic is safe to the environment. Every island that we put out recycled 3,900 bottles, just like this. And we put out 30 islands. So the project recycled 120,000 plastic bottles. We're using our plastic for good, not evil. The roots of the vegetation grow through the matrix. So underwater, there's a network of roots that are just hanging below the island, and it provides great cover for small fish to lay eggs, for protection from larger fish. The islands provide a great habitat, even for birds. We find nesting and eggs all over the islands. you see here is natural marsh, which is a lot of mangrove trees and smooth cord, but it's protecting a major highway to Grand Isle, which is called Louisiana Highway 1. And when we get to the Floating Island Project location, you'll be able to see that there is no natural marsh there. So you can see how this area has no marsh. There's no protection for the highway. We installed these islands about 6 months ago. Our purpose for this project is not to protect the highway for the next big storm. It is to protect this highway on a more daily basis. The islands break those 24-hour-a-day, wind-choppy waves from eating at the base of the highway. When a large hurricane comes, the islands can go down and be inundated for a 24 to 36-hour period, but then pop back up. And they recover just fine.
Nicole, you might want to go ahead and take a photo of that inn right there to show how that's taken off and growing.
The plant itself was put into this hole, this pre-drilled hole, but you can see, like here, it's spreading and it's growing on its own through the matrix. After Katrina, I was in North Carolina. Someone asked me why we should save New Orleans and Southeast Louisiana. My blood pressure got up pretty high because, you know, how would you feel if I said to you after the Chicago fire, why would we rebuild Chicago? Or after an earthquake in San Francisco, why would we rebuild? I mean, we live here. We love it here. We've been here for generations. It's our home, and we provide a lot to the rest of the country. So it needs to be saved.
There are all kinds of creative ways to help the oceans. In this case, art is a powerful tool.
I ended up being separated from the ocean for a long time, and I was feeling more and more like something was missing in my life. And I decided that I needed to get that connection back, so I started going to Hawaii, and that was where I saw this change that had happened in the ocean. I never had seen this plastic material before in the 90s at all on beaches, and suddenly at South Point there were mountains and mountains and mountains of plastic, colored plastic toys, things from household items, fishing gear. And I realized there was no people there. They weren't dumping it. That literally had come from everywhere around the world, and the ocean was just trying to get it out. It was throwing it up like a cat would throw up a hairball. I felt like I was visiting a crime scene. I knew no one would even believe that this material was down there, and the extent of it and the amount of it and the weirdness of it. And so that launched the Drifters Project, and for the next several years I just kept figuring out ways that I could get back there, clean it, get the stuff off the beach where it was harming nature, and put it back in front of people's eyes so they could look at it and reflect about it and try to understand what we've done. The ocean is always pushing things up on the beach, and in the past it used to be coconuts and driftwood and shells and all kinds of things like that, and those are still there, but now the plastic has actually eclipsed the natural material. I noticed that the ocean was actually like a giant sorting mechanism, and it would find things that were like each other. Like there's these things called net balls, which are these enormous big tangles of different colored nets, of different weights, of different thicknesses, of different sizes. And it makes you realize that it's all one ocean. It's just a giant interconnected body of water, and the water is moving this material around. And it's moving it around in a way that I believe is trying to communicate with us to pay attention. I grew up in the age of plastic, and it was always about disposability and ease and comfort and all these things that were supposed to be modern and make our lives more simple. But what we know now is that plastic is a material that has so many unintended consequences. It's killing creatures that are ingesting it accidentally. It's actually entangling other prey, just as they're moving through the ocean. We also know a whole host of diseases that are linked to the ingestion of the chemicals that plastic sheds, including ADHD, obesity, lower testosterone in males, a male genital birth defect. The primary way that we know things enter the ocean is through the water vector. So even in a landfill, when it rains, if the landfill is near a river, that stuff can wash down in. And eventually it's going to follow channels because water moves, and water moves downhill, and it ends up in the ocean.
As an artist and an environmentalist, Pam found a unique way to combine her passions.
People like my work initially. They like it because they think it's beautiful. And I do that on purpose because the beautiful is this sort of a hook, and I think it's like my secret weapon. Then you slowly start to realize that, oh, wow, that's comb, or that's a toothbrush, and those are things I use every day. And then they might read what the label is and what the material is and learn that this was ocean plastic found in Hawaii on a remote island that very few people even live on. How did it get there? That's the kind of questions I want people to start asking. And then at that point, we can start talking about the damage that this stuff is causing to nature, to creatures, to the non-human parts of the planet, but to humans as well. So this is a commission from a family that was on a boat trip in Hawaii, and they were there, and they didn't even realize that the captain didn't know what he was doing, and snagged a propeller with a drift net, which ended up causing the boat to sink, and the captain abandoned ship and left that family to die out there. So they all ended up surviving and were rescued. The father got a commendation from the Coast Guard, and the captain went to jail. But weirdly enough, I found one of those propeller snaggings by a drift net in Hawaii. And so when they approached me with this commission idea, I needed to make something that, to me, signified, first of all, the dark danger of this plastic and the vortex. Here's the lid of a coffee maker. So it's just all strange, weird things. Soles of shoes, spools of fishing material, some kind of fake spectacles, sunglasses. This piece is called Rainbows End in Paradise, Twisted on Trails. Hawaii has so many rainbows. They're just spontaneous, they're happening all the time. And it is paradise, but it's paradise that's been befouled by this plastic material waste. So this is a sort of rainbow of about 300 lighters that were picked up from albatross nests on Midway. It's a tiny island in the northern Hawaiian Islands. And it's one of the main albatross nesting sites in the world. The mother albatross will fly up into the Arctic Circle. They dip down in the water and they'll pick up crustaceans and fish and squid and things like that that are the food for their babies. And for some reason, they seem to like these lighters. They must look like a little squid or something. And they didn't evolve with plastic, so they don't have an awareness that this is not a natural food for them. What they do is they regurgitate this to their chicks, and their chicks have a full stomach, but they're not getting any nourishment because it's plastic. And so fully half of these chicks now are dying before they fledge with their stomachs impacted with plastic. And to me, that's a crime against nature. I can make a complete rainbow of color without even painting any of the objects because there's that much range of color out in the ocean. The craziest thing about these lighters is that we don't really need them. We have matches that are made of paper and wood that dissolve and go away, and they don't cause any harm. And these lighters never go away. I'm making art that is visually powerful. I show it in museums, in galleries, in public spaces. Art lovers will go, and they become converted in some ways by seeing this material and understanding it for the first time. So I think that's the real skill of artists, is making the invisible visible. What's good for the ocean is good for us. What's bad for the ocean is really bad for us, and it's really bad for the future of the planet because we're all interconnected, all the creatures are of the same fate as we are.
Another powerful form of art is filmmaking. What happens when an Oscar-winning filmmaker shines a light on a topic? People listen. Louis Sahoyas' Academy Award-winning documentary, The Cove, exposed brutality to dolphins in Japan. His latest project, Racing Extinction, explores even more ways we are in conflict with nature. How did you come up with the title, Racing Extinction?
It's really the combination of two ideas. You know, it's like we're racing against extinction. We're sort of a race that we can't afford to lose. It's just the idea is that we want people to feel an urgency. I grew up watching Jacques Cousteau specials and James Bond movies, and this is sort of a result of watching, you know, both of them together. The Earth is facing a mass extinction event right now. It is like an Avengers plot, except it's real.
So when you were making this film, did anything surprise you?
Well, yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I've been diving now for about 40 years, and every time you go back to the same dive spot, you can see the degradation of the oceans go on. If you have any kind of memory at all, you start to see this, you know, decline. And it's happened everywhere I've been, but you always think that maybe it's just because I'm in a really beautiful spot, it's sort of naturally, you know, going to get less beautiful. But then you start to realize that, okay, what's going on right now is it's a mass extinction event. We're acidifying the oceans. Coral reefs are dying. No matter how well you try to protect them, we're still acidifying them by the amount of carbon dioxide that we're putting into the air. About a third to half of that gets absorbed by the ocean, so it's starting to basically dissolve the coral reefs. I think this is the biggest story in the world, bar none. And I think that if we can start to solve this, the changes we do will affect the planet millions of years from now.
So how do we start? How do we start trying to reverse the degradation of the ocean and land, animals, species?
You get rid of carbon dioxide, you stop the methane melting up in the Arctic. The best way to do that is reduce carbon dioxide. How do you do that? You get off of fossil fuels as fast as you can. At my own organization, we had 120 solar panels up on the roof. We generated 140% of our energy. The last 1.5 films I did were generated by alternative energy. You know, we were a solar-powered movie. So one person can have a huge amount of difference. I mean, and if you look at, you know, the way that our film is constructed, it's to basically take away that voice in your head that says, well, I'm just one person that says, you know, who am I can't do anything. You know, my organization, the Oceanic Preservation Society, we're 6 people. You know, the actions we did and other like-minded organizations after The Cove came out, the first film I did, they were killing 23,000 dolphins a year in Japan. Now they're killing less than 6,000. So we're saving tens of thousands of dolphins just by a couple group of people. You know, it'll be hundreds of thousands over the course of a lifetime. One person can do a lot. We always forget how powerful we are, and together, you know, we can move mountains. But I think it's in our DNA to take care of future generations. I think we just sort of lost that. You know, we've lost our way of what it really means to be human. And that to me, it doesn't mean like taking care of just your family and your community. It means like taking care of the planet.
How is it possible that humans are causing so much damage?
The carbon dioxide that's produced by meat for us to eat causes far more carbon dioxide than all the vehicles in the entire transportation system, all the, you know, planes, trains, and automobiles. So if you want to reduce your carbon footprint, the easiest way to do it is reduce your meat consumption. You know, I've been vegan for 6 years, 7 years. That's the biggest thing somebody can do. And you think about it, you know, the average person eats about 10,400 animals in their lifetime. That's from, you know, shrimp and oysters to cows, pigs, and chickens. If you want to save the planet, the best way to do it is to, you know, eat more of a plant-based diet. And you start to look at the ripple effects of that. It has huge implications. You know, if everybody in America just stopped eating meat for just one day a week, it would be like taking permanently 7.6 million cars off the road every year. We have this old idea that it's a food pyramid and we're at the top. Well, it's more of a web, more of a house of cards. And when you take out one little thing like plankton, the whole house of cards falls. And the oceans, it's a big, huge house of cards out there.
Do you think the countries that you were in, Indonesia, China, Japan, do you feel like they're nervous about this film?
I think the governments now are starting to understand that they can no longer put these big stories under wraps. They know that the ocean is not an endless food source anymore. I'm not so concerned about the government. I'm concerned about the people. And once we're mobilized, I think the governments will do the right thing. Right now, we just need to have like a sort of a seagrass revolution, a grassroots revolution, so that the politicians have to do the right thing. You know, Sean Heinrichs, the guy the hero in our movie, he quotes a Japanese priest who said, "It's better to light one candle than curse the darkness." And what we wanted to do with this film is light the biggest candle we could in the world, make a film, a powerful film. At the end of our film, we light up the Empire State Building with endangered species as sort of a beacon of hope and inspiration to, the rest of humanity. I have a real strong faith that film and photography can change the world.